गया हूं।
Hello and welcome. My name is Vineet Malhotra and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories from around the world. Indian Prime Minister has chaired another cabinet meeting as tensions between India and Pakistan continue to escalate. Small arms firing is again reported at the line of control following the deadly Pahalgam terror attack in Kashmir. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov says that Russia is ready for direct talks with Ukraine following Vladimir Putin's announcement for a 3-day ceasefire in May. Meanwhile, Ukraine has signaled it is ready to sign the US minerals deal. Russia has started work on building a road bridge to North Korea. It comes as North Korea conducts the first test firing of its new warship's weapon system with cruise and anti-air missiles launched. Iran's foreign minister Abbas Araghchi has announced that his country will hold nuclear talks with France, the UK and Germany. This comes ahead of another round of nuclear talks with the US on Saturday taking place in Rome. Swedish prosecutors say a 16-year-old has been apprehended on suspicion of murder following a shooting in Uppsala. 3 people have been killed after an attack on a hair salon in Vaksala Square yesterday. United Kingdom's military has launched a joint operation with the US targeting Yemen's Houthi rebels. The strikes targeted a cluster of buildings south of the capital Sana'a, which is reportedly used by the Houthis to manufacture drones. US President Donald Trump celebrates his 100 days in office, stating nothing will stop me at campaign-style rally. Trump mocks the Democrats while commending his tariff action and immigration policies. Japan and the Philippines have pledged to deepen security ties amidst regional tensions. Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba and President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. meet in Manila. The Filipino leader also says that Chinese sea patrols are creating disturbances. Starting with our top stories, tensions are soaring between India and Pakistan as they edge closer to confrontation following the deadly terror attack in Jammu and Kashmir's Pahalgam. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has chaired a series of high-level security meetings this week, including the powerful Cabinet Committee on Security, just days after 26 people were brutally killed in the terror attack allegedly linked to Pakistan-backed terrorists. The April 22nd attack, claimed and later disowned by the Resistance Front, has sparked outrage in New Delhi. Modi has now authorized the armed forces to choose their own time, targets and tactics in response. Indian security forces remain on high alert as Pakistan continues to violate the ceasefire. Overnight firing was reported along the line of control and the international border in multiple sectors. India responded with both the army and BSF returning fire. Internationally, the UK Parliament held urgent discussions on the Pahalgam attack. British lawmakers across party lines backed India's efforts to bring the perpetrators to justice. UK Foreign Office Minister Hamish Falconer called the attack horrific and said the UK supports India completely. Let us listen in to what Hamish Falconer had to say.
The horrific terrorist attack in Pahalgam in Indian-administered Jammu and Kashmir on the 22nd of April was devastating. Our thoughts are with those affected, their loved ones, and of course the people of India. This is a very sensitive situation with real risks to regional and wider stability. The UK condemns all forms of terrorism and the extremism that sustains it, wherever it occurs.
Meanwhile, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio is expected to speak with India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar and his Pakistani counterpart in a bid to de-escalate the situation. And in a strong statement from the United Nations, leaders there warned that a confrontation between India and Pakistan would be catastrophic not only for the region but for the world. With tensions at a boiling point, all eyes are on New Delhi's next move. All right, Group Captain MJ Augustine, former MiG-21 pilot, Indian Air Force, is joining us on the program to talk more about this. Sir, appreciate you taking out the time and speaking with us. Well, obviously, the world is going to scramble at this point in time because, as Imran Khan also put it from jail the other day, that, this region is a nuclear flashpoint. But India is a responsible country. We have a no first use policy. But tactical nuclear bombs is something that Pakistan considers as its backbone, because when it comes to conventional war, Group Captain Augustine, Pakistan is not going to be able to sustain more than a couple of days. So the complications as well as the intricacies revolving around an India-Pakistan all-out war are something that need to be taken into their stride by the world.
Precisely. I mean, there are a couple of things that we need to understand and our viewers need to understand. Firstly, no first use. Even China has no first use. No first use is actually not too good for people who are on the receiving end. Because once you use nuclear weapon against India, India reserves the right to raise you to the ground. So that is the kind of policy no first use brings on the table. No first use, Vineet, also allows India to have the triad completely ready, which means delivery from surface to surface missiles, delivery from air to surface, and delivery from nuclear submarines or submarines. So no first use is actually not a good news for Pakistan. Point number one. Point number two is the retaliation will be so severe that Pakistan maybe in a couple of thousands of years may not be able to grow a grass or a blade of grass on their land. That is point number two. Another important aspect that we need to understand is the nuclear saber rattling is something Pakistan has been doing for a while. And I want the world to look at it. I mean, you all have phones, you can Google it. The amount of nuclear warhead as a small nation Pakistan holds is much, much more than a large nation like India. And their only small enemy is India. So why do they need to hold so many nuclear warheads? So that is a question that needs an answer. Then let's talk about the good question that you asked, the nuclear tactical nuclear weapon, or also called the TNW. The TNWs, use of TNWs, the no first use of Indian policy says if you use TNWs against Indian troops, it will be considered as an attack on India. The counter argument by Pakistan is when India attacks Pakistan and moves into Pakistani territory, they will use TNWs in Pakistan territory. Now, Pakistan territory itself is a disputed area because the POJK, or the Pakistan occupied Jammu and Kashmir, is actually Indian territory which is illegally occupied by Pakistan, and the world knows you don't have an international, you have an international border there which is with Pakistan, but then you also have another line called line of actual control and line of control. So these two, the line of actual control and line of control was a quasi-official line which post annulling of Simla Accord by Pakistan, that line is also completely blurred. So now the only line logically and legally that exists is the international boundary between India and Pakistan, which part of it is illegally held by Pakistan, and which India is rightful to claim its land. And there, if the tactical nuclear weapon is used against India, and it will be taken or construed as an attack against India, and India then reserves the right of retaliating with so much force that Pakistan will probably think twice. But United States, NATO, and many such countries, I was in the wargaming department for a while, we wargamed the scenario, many scenarios. There is no scenario in which Pakistan is going to use the nuclear weapon. It will only use it as a card or a nuclear saber rattling, as we call it. It does not have a situation or a condition in which even the warhead is going to be mated with the delivery mechanism.
Right, and Group Captain Augustine, there's also been a theory. Sorry to interject you, sir. There's also been a theory that Pakistan is no longer, the possessor of these nuclear weapons. They are secretly guarded by American forces. So obviously, if you look at the precedents from the past as well, Pakistan has lost all wars against India, and even the ones that were not started were brokered by a third party. Do you think that a similar scenario could unfold in the future as well? Perhaps the Americans or the Chinese, coming in and trying to assuage this tension between India and Pakistan? And should India settle for it, considering that our civilians are dying?
Great question, Vinny, as usual. See, there are two aspects to the nuclear weapon. One is the conventional nuclear weapon, and rightfully, American forces are guarding it because you don't want mutually assured destruction of this small blue planet in which we are living. And this is the only home we have till probably Elon Musk takes us to Mars and creates a colony there. And you cannot harm our blue planet. And rightfully, Americans are guarding those huge stockpile of nuclear weapons in Pakistan. But that is conventional nuclear weapon. Now, the tactical nuclear weapon, which has a fallout zone of 10 to 20 kilometers, is missiles like Abdali and Raad, which is an air-launched cruise missile. They are not held with the American forces. They are held in the bases in Pakistan. So though the fallout will last longer, but it will be limited in geography. So that is something that we need to be little wary of, firstly. And secondly, India is aware that the existence of those missiles and the locations of those missiles. So if we go on an all-out war, which I do not think we will, it will be a limited intensity conflict. If we do, we will first take out the TNWs, and then we will go out for an all-out war, is my reading of the subject. But we do not need to go out on all-out war because our aim is not to dismember Pakistan or finish the country as it is imploding itself. We don't want a country which is a ghetto next to the border. So we don't, a failed Pakistan is not in the interest of India, and India understands that. Therefore, what we need to do is remove the thorn that has been there for a couple of decades between two countries, which is Pakistan occupied Jammu and Kashmir. A reason why it is kept alive and reason why it is being tom-tommed in Pakistan is that is the only raison d'etre, as they say in French, the reason for existence of Pakistani military. Once this thorn is gone, the existence of Pakistani military and itself comes under question. So it's in the interest of Pakistan and India that the brothers of either side of the border come together and
Right. And Group Captain
Jammu and
Augustine
Kashmir becomes one.
Group Captain Augustine,
Gone is
just
gone.
one last question, sir. We have a paucity of time. Just one last question before I let you go. And I request you to please keep that answer as short as possible. We have other areas to touch upon as well. Until just a couple of years ago, Group Captain Augustine, Pakistan was defaulting on its loans to the IMF. It's a very practical question. How are they going to afford any kind of a conflict with anyone, let alone India?
Absolutely. In fact, this question, IMF has asked them many times. The loans that we are giving, you're doling it out to Pakistani military, both in terms of pension and in terms of pay. And a very small amount is used to replenish their weapons. IMF has been asking this question. People who are loaning them amount like Saudi Arabia, Turkey, are asking in your country and not spend on something which is which once you fire goes kaboom and that's it. The money is gone. Over to you.
Absolutely. Group Captain Augustine, always a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for those incisive and accurate responses. Thank you so much. All right, moving on. The Israeli military has released a Palestinian paramedic detained during an attack on emergency workers in southern Gaza last month. According to Palestinian Red Crescent Society, Asad al-Nasasra had been missing for 3 weeks before the International Committee of the Red Cross confirmed his detention in Israel. He was one of the 10 detainees freed at an Israeli border crossing with Gaza. Listen to one of the freed detainees.
مكثنا أكثر من 5 شهور في سجن يعني وضع كثير صعب كثير سيء بالنسبة لي كثير كان سيء أول مرة بفوت سجن زي هيك مقطوعين من الأخبار والاتصالات. بدعو الجميع لإطلاق جميع عسرانا الموجودين.
And the military confirmed holding Nasasra after an internal inquiry into the March 23rd attack, which killed 15 emergency workers, including 8 paramedics from the PRCS and 6 first responders from Gaza Civil Defense Agency. The attack occurred when their ambulances, a fire truck, and a UN vehicle came under fire in Rafah. The bodies of the victims were later found in shallow graves. Meanwhile, the United Nations has condemned the ongoing violence in Gaza, with UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres expressing serious concerns over the worsening humanitarian crisis. Let's listen in to what UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres had to say.
The humanitarian situation throughout the Gaza Strip has gone from bad to worse to beyond imagination. I am alarmed by statements by Israeli government officials about the use of humanitarian aid as a tool for military pressure.
And this statement comes after a series of Israeli airstrikes in Gaza, including a drone attack that killed 5 children in Gaza City, according to the Hamas-run Health Ministry. Meanwhile, the International Court of Justice conducted a second day of hearings regarding Israel's humanitarian responsibilities towards Palestinians as the ongoing Israeli blockade on humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip reaches its 50th day. Mr. Jordan Cope, Middle East affairs expert, is joining us on the program to talk more about this. Jordan, appreciate you being here. Well, the situation is, far from over and serious by the day in Gaza. 5 children have been killed, and Israel is being questioned and pulled up at this point in time as to its humanitarian responsibilities in Gaza. What do you have to say to that?
Well, first, any war is a tragedy, and any civilian life lost is indeed also a tragedy. The incident that you referred to regarding the 15 medics happened at night. 5 vehicles approached an area where IDF soldiers were located, quickly disembarked, and unfortunately, as often in war, mistakes are made. 15 people were killed. It was later found out that approximately 6 of them were Hamas operatives, but nonetheless, 8 innocent medics were still killed in the process. If you look at wars around the world, according to UN statistics themselves, 90% of all those killed in modern day warfare are civilians. And so to reiterate, any life lost in war is tragic. Israel has since responded by firing the deputy commander who was involved in the incident, and that has severely reprimanded another commander involved in the relevant units. And so it is indeed a tragedy. Even throughout this war, Israel has exercised more humanitarian responsibility than many other countries worldwide. It has allowed over 1 million tons of aid into the Gaza Strip. Under the 4th Geneva Convention, militaries do not have to allow in humanitarian aid if they have reasonable belief to suspect that that aid will reach combatants. And throughout the Gaza Strip, it's been estimated that 60% of all humanitarian aid has ended up in the hands of the very militant combatants that Israel is fighting, that being Hamas and the Islamic Jihad, terrorist organizations that aspire for Israel's destruction and the genocide of the Jewish people. So warfare is obviously complex. Even despite these incidents, civilian casualties, even when using Hamas's reported numbers, which have been fabricated over time, according to statistic experts, it would still show that the civilian casualty rates are far lower than most modern day conflicts, despite this conflict being conducted in the Gaza Strip, which is incredibly dense.
And in Jordan, where do you see this conflict going in the next few weeks, next few days, considering the fact that Hamas and the sponsors of outfits like Hamas refuse to stop this aggression towards Israel?
It's interesting to see that the pressure finally seems to be getting to Hamas, because with the withholding of the aid has actually propelled and compelled many Palestinians to start protesting against Hamas in the Gaza Strip. We've now seen thousands of Palestinians in various protests in various towns throughout the Gaza Strip protesting openly against Hamas in manners that I haven't seen in years. And so as that pressure has built upon Hamas has started to make some concessions, both in terms of transparency and in terms of ceasefire negotiation conditions. It's revealed more recently that 72% of all casualties in the recent conflict were actually men and boys of fighting age, which seems to indicate actually that Israel has been far more precise in targeting combatants than Hamas once claimed, because Hamas wanted to show, after all, that this conflict wasn't affecting civilians as much. On top of that, Hamas in recent ceasefire negotiations has expressed an openness to, while not disbanding, to a ceasefire that would last for 5 years. And so obviously no condition is acceptable until Hamas and its genocidal aspirations are no longer governing the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip. But what we can expect in the future, perhaps, is Hamas feeling more and increasingly vulnerable and understanding that perhaps in the future its time could be winding down. So throughout war, it's impossible to predict the future, but hopefully how the war is being conducted now, with Israel controlling more territory throughout the Gaza Strip, which is very important for demoralizing Hamas's morale and the supporters of Hamas, perhaps we will see better outcomes in the future, but not if Qatar continues to discourage Hamas from being more open in terms of ceasefire negotiation conditions.
All right.
It's been rumored that Qatar, just one quick point, that Qatar has actually discouraged Hamas and has encouraged it to withhold time to get some better conditions and to keep them in power.
Jordan, always a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for those insights. Well, moving on, Japan and the Philippines have pledged to deepen defense ties amid rising tensions with China. This follows the Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba's first visit to Manila since taking office, where he met with Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. This meeting comes at a critical juncture, with both countries facing increasing concerns about regional security and China's growing assertiveness in the South China Sea. Their talks focused on boosting security cooperation, sharing intelligence, and negotiating 2 new defense pacts. The proposed agreement would support Japanese troops during joint training missions in the Philippines, and both leaders strongly opposed any attempts to alter the status quo in the East and South China Seas by forcing. Here's what the Japanese Prime Minister and the President of the Philippines had to say.
重層的に協力の進化が進められてきておりますが、ACSA物品役務相互提供協定について交渉を開始をするということで一致をいたしました。将来的な情報保護協定の締結に向け、政府間で議論を開始することを確認をいたしました。アメリカを含めました日本、アメリカ、フィリピン協力の重要性についても確認をいたしたところであります。
On defense and security cooperation, it is of note that the Philippines is the first recipient of Japan's official security assistance. And even as a new initiative, barely 3 years old, the OSA has allowed our security agencies, especially the Department of National Defense, to achieve meaningful upgrades.
And in another development, the Philippines accused China of creating disturbances in the South China Sea as in the region. The Philippines said that Beijing's actions infringe on its sovereignty and threaten regional peace. Meanwhile, over 14,000 Filipino and US troops are holding joint drills, which China has condemned as provocative. The Philippines maintains that these exercises are necessary for preparedness, not provocation. Meanwhile, the Philippines and New Zealand signed a troop agreement strengthening their defense ties and paving the way for increased military cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. All right, joining us on the show to talk more about this is Don McLean-Gill, geopolitical analyst. Don, appreciate you being here. Well, this is no surprise that the Philippines and Japan are gearing up to, respond to the Chinese aggression, which has been prevalent for quite some time. In fact, even the ASEAN countries, for the better part of the last 5 years, have been trying to tell the world that these exercises that China has been conducting and this land grabbing also that China has been taking part in is against international law.
Thank you very much, Vineet. It's a true pleasure to speak to you again. Now, for the Philippines, while we have our traditional alliance, treaty alliance with the US, Japan has established its place as another very important security partner, be it geographically, as both the Philippines and Japan are strategically situated in the first island chain. When it comes to capacity building, Japan is one of the most important partners in building up the modernization program of the Philippine Coast Guard, and of course the OSA, and of course shared interests in pushing back against China's expansionism. So Prime Minister Ishiba's visit coincides with significant milestones in what President Marcos Jr. describes as a golden age of bilateral relations. So this includes the Reciprocal Access Agreement and Japan's full participation in this year's annual Balikatan exercises for the first time, indicating a shared willingness to enhance joint preparedness and interoperability, and of course, doing it bilaterally and multilaterally as well, amid growing uncertainties. And as a demonstration of this continuous commitment in operationalizing the RAA, and of course, the broader security partnership, there have been negotiations, as you have mentioned earlier, regarding the possible AXA, which would facilitate the RAA by improving coordination for refueling and the provision of food for Japanese troops, and of course, another GSOMIA between Japan and the Philippines. So there was already a GSOMIA between Japan and the US in 2007, and one between the Philippines and the US last year. This would improve intelligence sharing and coordination. So no matter how much you have, as far as military assets are concerned, what would eventually matter would be whether you have the right and needed intelligence for facilitating and maximizing such operations. And I think that this is the direction, a multifaceted partnership that is proactive enough to adapt based on the emerging realities.
Don, appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much for those perspectives. Well, that's all we have time for now. We will continue to bring you more news and updates from around the world.